Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Driven Wyld. Today we are talking about Uber and Lyft unintentionally sent gig workers' social security numbers to social media companies, Northeastern research uncovers. So recently I got an email from one of my subscribers, BC. Thank you so much for emailing me about this and making this video possible. And it turns out our data has been compromised, claiming that Uber and Lyft unintentionally sent our social security numbers to social media companies. Now, I don't know a whole lot about what happened here, but I don't like the idea, especially as you heard, I'm an Uber driver myself, or an UberEats driver. I don't like the idea that my personal information has been sent to another company. So with that said, we are talking about everything that's being said in this article, how it actually is for Uber and Lyft drivers, and everything in between. So with that said, let's get started. When a person applies to work for Uber or Lyft, they must fill out several online forms detailing important information, including their date of birth and their driver's license. Applicants must also provide more sensitive information, such as their social security number. New Northeastern research has revealed that until just recently, those ride-hailing companies have been unintentionally sending that data to TikTok and Meta, two of the world's largest social media companies. Let the record show that both ends of the spectrum of social media companies that have been heavily scrutinized now have access to our social security numbers, even if you had no intentions of providing it to them. While Zuckerberg does have a lot of connections with some of the more active parties involved in the TikTok ban, it doesn't mean that they're exempt from the scrutiny that they've received. And of course, there's the scrutiny of TikTok, which has been heavily scrutinized for a bunch of different reasons, some of them being nonsense and some of them not. And I'm not going to get too deep into the accuracy of anything, but they've been on the wrong end of a TikTok ban in the country. They might actually be the first social media platform that's actually being banned, which is a heavy hindrance to our freedom of speech. They're owned by ByteDance, so they're seen as a Chinese company, even though they're in Singapore, and even though the data is held in America, they're still seen as that. And TikTok claims that they're not as influenced by ByteDance as they claim to be, but nevertheless. And then there's a lot of people upstairs that are like,
TikTok's not gonna get banned. If they get banned because they're a Chinese company, I'll just buy them.
Which kind of just reveals their hand right there, but nevertheless. Lyft shared unsalted hashes of workers' social security number with Facebook, Meta, and TikTok, while Uber shared unsalted hashes of SSN with Facebook, the researchers wrote in the paper. Okay, so Uber only shared with Facebook, and Lyft shared with Facebook and TikTok. That's an interesting find. Wonder why Uber shared that data, though. Like, what was their intention? They said it was unintentional, but we know that's full of shit. Hashes are used in cybersecurity to make information harder to be collected by hackers by transforming data into a string of characters. Hashes that are unsalted are considered to be insecure because they are not randomized the way a salted hash would be. Harder does it make it impossible, though. I don't like the idea that they're sharing our data to begin with. David Schaffness, a Northeastern University professor of computer sciences and cybersecurity expert, is one of several researchers who uncovered security issues with tracking pixels, which are analytics tools that follow users around the web. Tracking pixels are small lines of code embedded in images on a site's interface. They allow companies to see users' behavior and collect valuable information for advertising efforts. Almost every website you visit these days has trackers on it, Schaffness says. If you ever wondered if you've been on Facebook or Instagram and you see ads that were very relevant to a website you were just looking at, it's because Meta, the parent company, has trackers on a bunch of websites. They know who you are and what websites you are visiting. The same is true for TikTok. The same is true for Google. and the number of companies in that marketplace. I'm not surprised that these companies are tracking our data for advertising purposes. Like, I get that, but what I am shocked about is that they have our social security information. They have very, very sensitive data. That's crossing a line for sure. Companies like Uber and Lyft have been incentivized to add these trackers to their website because in exchange, Meta, TikTok, and others provide these companies with free tools that allow them to analyze their own web traffic, Chofness explains. What Chofness and his colleagues uncovered was that these pixels were inadvertently collecting data from private web form and then sending that data directly to Meta and TikTok. Recently, I did a review on a hotel and I gave that hotel shit for not having a specific web form because that just seemed like it made more sense to me. Now I kind of get it. Like, now I'm like, oh, okay, it's not as convenient, but it's much more secure. I didn't think about that very hard. So I guess that's a cool thing to know too. The issue here is that companies are deploying tracking in many cases to help with targeted ads, understanding the effectiveness of ads, and ultimately monetization. Because of the way these things are configured, often these companies are slurping up a lot of data about individuals, including stuff we put into web forms where there is no warning that says, hey, your data is also going to be sent to Facebook when you click submit. Why would they be more transparent? Then you wouldn't actually be able to target our shit, right? I hate this so much. Chofness and his colleagues were able to uncover these vulnerabilities by going through the same process an interested worker would when signing up to be a driver of these services. Notably, they only discovered the issue was present when they applied using Uber or Lyft's desktop website. Oh, okay, that's good to know. If you signed up through your phone, you wouldn't have this problem. If you signed up online through your computer, you might actually have this problem. And don't think this is limited to Uber or Lyft either. This is only the ones that got caught. Don't assume that Doordash or Grubhub or any of these other companies wouldn't do the same thing. And with other platforms. They were inspired to conduct the experiments because they were interested in seeing how vulnerable gig workers are when sharing personal data to gain employment, he says. The larger context was looking at gig worker privacy and how that is a group of individuals that often don't have a choice in terms of how much of this online tracking they're exposed to. So we were trying to quantify just how much of their personal data is exposed, which parties are getting it, and what kind of data is exposed, he adds. For Uber and Lyft's part, Chofness says that when the researchers shared their findings with the companies, they quickly worked to fix vulnerabilities. The word that was used in our correspondence was unintentional, says Chofness. They did not intend to do this. Once they knew what the issue was, it was just a configuration option. These pixels do not have to collect data from web forms, he says. Yeah, but that's what they told you. That doesn't mean they're not doing it. Because in reality, what is really to stop them from just turning it back on when you're looking away or looking elsewhere now? What's to stop them from finding an alternative way to send this information to them? Because you know that they're going to make money from this. You could tell them not to, but it's kind of telling that they seem to be on by default, whether it was just an oversight by someone who initially configured it for their website, or whether these website owners, when they sign up for these pixels, are guided towards turning them on. And what happens if you say no? Will they suddenly give you a problem when applying? Like, what's going on there? Chofness and his colleagues propose that companies should not treat worker data the same way they handle the data of general consumers. To apply for a job, you have to share such data as your tax ID, social security number, mailing address, and phone number, he highlights. It's much different when you're just a consumer of that service, he says. If you want somebody to deliver your food, you need a credit card, an email address, and that's it. I will put a gentle pushback on this. If I am looking for different gigs and opportunities to earn money and I'm looking for side hustles, I want to be told about all different kinds of side hustles and opportunities. employees. That's not consumerism. That is fulfilling an ambition. That said, no, I do not believe sensitive data should be shared across the board. Everything else he said is spot on. Like, you should not be sharing my social security number with anybody. You shouldn't even have that information. In fact, fuck off. However, the way things are presently configured at most websites, these companies are treating worker data and consumer data in roughly the same way. True, and honestly, I am not the biggest fan of regulation of any kind, but I do believe worker data and consumer data definitely need to be separated in a specific kind of way. If I am looking for a side hustle and I want to apply to be part of a different platform, right? That can go absolutely in the same level as consumerism. But if I just applied to a gig, I don't want other people to know my personal data and then utilize it in any way they see fit. That is two completely different worlds. And I think there needs to be some solid boundaries with that. These companies must do a better job of implementing purpose limitation statements, he highlights, which are essentially written out statements that explicitly state how the company plans to use the data of its employees to keep their word. Okay, I hate the idea that you use the word employees. We're independent contractors. This is the point I was bringing up about not a fan of regulation because you can't even get the proper information right. So what can workers do to protect themselves against their data being shared without their consent? In Europe, under the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, companies are required to set purpose limitations. However, no such rule exists in the United States, and we do not have any type of federal data privacy laws that would protect these workers, Schaffness highlights. Schaffness stresses that more needs to be done to make these companies more accountable and transparent with their actions. True, but I would like to remind everybody that anytime we bring the government into anything, they never do the thing that they're supposed to do. Like, every time somebody brings up the point of
there needs to be more regulation on these companies. Like, seriously, they are getting away with way too much.
the government then comes back to say,
Oh, let's just turn these independent contractors into employees. That sounds like a great idea.
the fuck it does. Literally nobody that really knows the gig economy wants that. We want to maintain the independent contractor status and have control of our time and our energy, as well as the income we produce, but we don't want to do that via turning us into employees. And also, that would have nothing to do with this, even though that would be their default response. It's just who they are. Not to mention how we know that this would be bundled into everything else. Like, they got the TikTok ban through some Ukrainian bill about funding them for more military supplies or some shit. We need more privacy and advocacy for privacy in general, he says. If we don't want companies like Meta and TikTok to be gathering our personal data from web forums, we should make it illegal. It should not be allowed without prominent disclosure that before you hit send says, wait, I'm about to send that data to a bunch of other people. Are you okay with that? Even if that sounds pretty terrible, and maybe it shouldn't happen at all. I would be fine with just an opt-out feature. If there's gotta be a way for you to say, hey, I do not consent to have my data shared to anybody. And I'm pretty sure Uber has that, but that should be on the application page before you hit submit or whatever. But they'll hide that so deeply regardless. This is my opinion. It's worth what you pay for it. None of you pay me. There you go. In terms of tracking our actions and putting advertisements in front of us in the name of consumerism, I know a lot of people have a problem with that. I am okay with it in the sense that it helps me solve a problem I'm actively looking to solve. In terms of finding a side hustle, as long as they're not sending my private info and they're putting side hustles in front of me, yeah, sure, whatever. But then there's things like this, to where they're sending our very sensitive data to Facebook and TikTok. They claim it's unintentional, but in reality, is Meta or TikTok going to delete that information even though it was unintentional? No. Are they going to be accountable for their actions? Of course not. Or are they just going to find a more covert way to accomplish the same thing now that it's been exposed this way? Of course they will. But that's another reason why we need to make sure we're protecting ourselves financially and protecting our data as a whole, because no one is going to look out for ourselves the way we are. And if they do decide to add regulation and stop all this crap, it's probably going to be some generalized bill, and it's not going to really help us in any way. All in all, I just hope that those who actively want to look for side hustles are able to find them in a way to where their personal data isn't going to be shared. That said, a way you could find more platforms to work on or exit strategies to build is via the Driven Wyld Discord server. The Driven Wyld Discord community is exclusive for gig workers looking to expand their knowledge and expertise in their self-employment and entrepreneurial journeys. I partnered with high-level professionals to bring you some of the most exclusive benefits based on your needs as a gig worker. Exclusive professional opportunities and gig postings. More live streams with high-level professionals in our industry. Educational systems to help you build your own dispatch company, as well as other scalable opportunities. Whether you're a gig worker looking for more opportunities to earn or an exit strategy, because the gig economy is an income bridge to what would be a long-term goal and not the goal, and you're looking for something with more growth and more scalability, there's something here for you. Check the link in the description and get started with making the most amount of money in the least amount of time and in the safest possible way. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.